I actually started my career as a sort of documentary wildlife filmmaker. I grew up in San Diego, California, and I started making surf movies of me and my friends on Super 8 cameras when I was a little kid. And I would splice them together, and we'd go to my house and turn all the lights off and watch ourselves surfing like it was our own surf movie. And my dream was to be a photojournalist for National Geographic magazine. I wanted to travel all over the world and take pictures of cool things. And that was my dream. And I actually lived part of that dream. When I started my career, uh, I actually lived in Park City, Utah for a while as a ski bum, and I worked on ski films up there. And then I ultimately moved to Los Angeles in 1977. And even though I grew up in San Diego, I went to Utah and I came back to LA in 77. And I worked on a film that a guy in the Peace Corps had made while he was in Africa for several years. That became a fairly successful documentary film, and that led my career in the beginning. And so I started my career as a documentary and wildlife sort of cameraman producer. And in 1983, I think it was late 83, a buddy of mine came to me, and I'd kind of risen up through this independent film production company, so that I was whatever, very young, but I was kind of running this small production house in LA. And a buddy of mine came and said, "Hey, we can't afford production insurance for this video that I am doing for $10,000. So could we run it through your company?" Well, that turned out to be for this new singer named Madonna. And and I met the director of that video, a gentleman by the name of Wayne Isham, who's one of the most famous directors in the history of MTV. And he and I ultimately became partners. He actually came back to my office that night because he was into wildlife films, and I happened to have a fake pond set up in my office that I was shooting with time-lapse cameras that was like an underwater pond, because half the stuff you see in these wildlife films is not actually shot in the wilds. So anyway, that led to my career making music videos for MTV. And my joke used to be, as I used to say, I went from working with wild animals to working with wilder animals, because the 80s was the era of heavy metal. And we did a video for a band called Motley Crue for a song called Smoking in the Boys Room, which became the #1 video on MTV. And that's when metal kind of exploded. And so from that point on, I did every music video for Motley Crue, for Bon Jovi, for Def Leppard, for Judas Priest, for Ozzy Osbourne, for Metallica, for Megadeth, for all these bands. And during the heyday of that music on MTV, they used to have a thing called the MTV Top 10 Countdown. 7 of the 10 videos would be videos that we had produced through my company. And so we became very, very successful in that. We later went on and worked with a lot of non-metal bands. I did videos for Billy Joel, Whitney Houston, Michael Jackson, Janet Jackson, the Rolling Stones, Pink Floyd, it just goes on and on and on and on. That was a crazy time, but what was sort of germane to all of that in terms of my life is I've always been very entrepreneurial. It was sort of like when I was doing surfing movies, I wanted to do this and do my own movies and all this other stuff. I actually made my first professional film when I was 17 years old. So I always had this entrepreneurial drive that I wanted to do something new. I wanted to do something that nobody had ever done before. And that still lives inside of me to this day. That's still what drives me every day, is I want to do things that people haven't done before. And I want to make something happen that hasn't happened, and that people say, oh, that's impossible, or it's just not going to be, et cetera, et cetera. At times in my career, that's led me to be way too early on certain things. Because what happened was, when MTV was happening, when we would do a music video then, like when I did the music video for Enter Sandman for Metallica, no one had ever seen a video like that. That was just like, now you look at it and it's kind of like, okay, it's still kind of cool, but it's like, whatever. But no one had seen a video quite like that, how we did it with strobes and the stuff that we did in that, et cetera, et cetera. When I did the concert video following Bon Jovi on the road for a song called Wanted Dead or Alive, nobody had ever seen a video that captured the rock star, the real rock star backstage lifestyle like that. And so we were always looking to do things that were kind of breaking ground and creating a new visual thing. And what happened during that time was that the video vocabulary is what I would call it. The style of cutting and editing and storytelling that happened on MTV ultimately infiltrated motion pictures and television. And if you watch a movie before like 1990, it'll be cut much, much, much more slowly, edited much more slowly than a movie that happened after that. Because people got used to quick cutting and fast things and storytelling that wasn't exactly perfectly linear, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, we had, there's a lot of people that will say that MTV was part of electing Bill Clinton president, et cetera, et cetera. But during that time in the 80s and 90s, we were like right in the middle of a cultural revolution where if you were a kid in the 80s and 90s, MTV was part of your life. It was, it was embedded into what you did every day. And it was the campaign, I Want My MTV, that ad campaign, I Want My MTV, was started by a guy named Les Garland, who is one of my co-founding partners of QYOU Media. And so I got it into my blood then that I wanted to do stuff that was new, that was fresh, that was exciting, that was creating new iconic stuff, et cetera, et cetera. Well, what happened is a buddy of mine who was actually playing on tour with Pink Floyd when I did all the concert videos and music videos for Pink Floyd from a record called Delicate Sound of Thunder, which actually is getting released for one night into movie theaters, I think next month, if movie theaters are open. But at any rate, he started and got involved in this business when he got off the road called the CD-ROM business. Well, the CD-ROM business, everybody's forgotten about. Someday I'll write this in a book, but the CD-ROM business, I always say, because I came out of the music thing, was the warm-up act for the internet. And the CD-ROM business, everybody's forgotten, was supposed to be this new savior business where when you bought a new PC, a computer, you had CD-ROMs that were bundled with the computer with kids' games and Encarta, a map, and all this other stuff that was in there. And everybody thought that bandwidth was going to happen where you'd be able to go into the computer and be able to do things. Well, that never happened. It didn't happen for all sorts of reasons. Part of the reason it didn't happen is that the software and the hardware weren't compatible. And so you constantly had these CD-ROMs and it worked on a Dell computer, but it didn't work on an Acer computer. And so the sound cards were different or the whatever and all this technology stuff. And that's when I started to get involved with the media space from the traditional media business of just making cool videos or TV shows or whatever, and then creating this sort of next gen content that was marrying technology and media that happened in the CD-ROM business. I was part of a company called Seventh Level at that time that created and spawned what we called Sillywood. And Sillywood, S-I-L-I Wood, was the merging of Silicon Valley and Hollywood. And I used to say to people that if you asked an editor, if I shot all the film for a video and I hand it to an editor, that video editor, if I handed it to 5 different editors, I'm going to get 5 different versions back of that video. Okay, they're all going to be cut differently. But in my mind and in most people's minds, you think that computer programming is kind of right or wrong. There's one way to do it. But if I've got 5 computer programmers and ask them, how do I get up from my chair right now and walk out the door? All 5 of them are going to code it differently. It's part science and part art. Computer coding is not all science. It's not like a chemical formula where there's only one H2O, and if it's not H2O, it's not water. It's not like that at all. Computer programming is an art form as much as it is in science, and that's where you'll hear people talk about great coders and great things. So that's where I became super fascinated during that CD-ROM period with the merging of technology and media. And wow, what's going to happen as these two things merge together and what's going to happen? I'm talking about 1996, 97, 98. I was actually on stage in 1997 in San Francisco with Bill Gates presenting what was for IE4, Internet Explorer 4, the launch of IE4 in 1997. And I was standing with Bill Gates on stage showing this big audience the deal that I had done at Seventh Level with us and a Japanese toy company called Bandai and Microsoft, and we'd created a thing called the Tamagotchi Virtual Pet. And it was a little app. We didn't call it an app then. You didn't call it an app then. It sat on your active desktop using what was then called DHTML, dynamic HTML, to let you feed the pet every day and take care of a pet on your computer screen like you'd feed a fish in a fishbowl. And so I've been in that stuff. And so that time period for me, that transition period in the CD-ROM world of going, holy shit, technology and media, this is where this is all going. These two things are going to be inextricably linked forevermore. It's not just about making movies. It's not just about making TV shows. It's not just about writing code. This is all going to merge together. And so what happened was in 1999, when it was the dot-com bubble to the extreme, this was when I used to have a cartoon in my office that I loved. It was two kids next to each other with lemonade stands, selling lemonade. And one kid, his lemonade stand didn't have any customers. And the other one said lemonade.com. And there was a line around the block to his lemonade stand. That was in 1999. And that was exemplary of the insanity. You just put .com on anything. I mean, that's how pets.com started, and this .com and that .com. It was literally huge companies were taking the .com and going, okay, we got to reinvent our company and put .com on the end, and we'll be worth $1 billion with no revenue associated with it. So that bubble, in the middle of that bubble, I said, okay, this whole thing's going to change. And I started a company called Cinema Now. Cinema Now was about the second or third company, really the first that got noted, but it was the second or third company that came out with the concept of streaming movies and TV shows over this new platform called the internet. And we came to people and said, we're going to take a full-length movie and a full-length TV show, and we're going to stream them over the internet to a computer screen. And ultimately, someday, there's going to be a way to take it from your computer screen and put it on your television. And so that was how Cinema Now got started in 1999. And for the next 8 years, there's the expression, how can you tell a pioneer? By the scars from the arrows in his back. We went through this crazy wave. That's when I met Scott Patterson in 1999, because Lionsgate was one of my first investors. And most people thought we were owned by Lionsgate. We weren't. They were just one of our largest investors when we started the company. And John Feldheimer and Michael Burns, who to this day are the two top guys at Lionsgate, they started in 1999, and here they're still there in 2020, 21 years later. We're on my board of directors for Cinema Now, and we were going to reinvent movie distribution and television distribution. In 2000, there's a show that takes place in Las Vegas every year called CES, the Computer Electronics Show. And I went with Michael Burns to have breakfast at the Bellagio Hotel, which became an annual breakfast for about the next 4 or 5 years, with a guy named Reed Hastings and a guy named Ted Sarandos. If you don't know those names, those guys are both billionaires. Reed is the founder of Netflix. And Ted just got named co-CEO with Reed like a couple months ago. Ted was their head content guy. And we sat down for breakfast, and I laid out and I said, Reed, the name of your company is Netflix. So it's not really just about ordering them off the internet, because at that time you ordered a DVD that the postman delivered to your home. I said, aren't you going to change this so that it's actually watching it over the net, that you're going to use the net to actually watch the movie? And he said, yeah, Curt, absolutely. We think that's where we're going to go. But he said, I think that's going to take at least 10 years. And I walked out with Michael Burns. I still remember this. I walked out with Michael Burns. I go, 10 years? What is he talking about? 10 years? This is going to happen in 2 years. You know, they're gonna be left in the dust. What's gonna happen? Well, one of the reasons Reed's a billionaire now is timing's everything, and his timing was actually right, which no one predicted at that time. Everybody thought streaming was going to happen much faster in 2000 than it actually did, and Cinema Now continued. Microsoft was an investor. Cisco was an investor. We ultimately sold. We didn't make any money off the company. We lost money. We sold the company, the brand, to Best Buy, and we sold the technology platform to a company called Rovi, and which is merged into other companies and become a different thing now. But Cinema Now spent from 1999 to 2008 laying the groundwork, basically, for what became the streaming business. It relates also to what I'll get to about Q if anybody listens to any of this long. What happened is that I said finally with Cinema Now, everybody in 2007, 2008 was starting to give up and just like, you know, we've been at this and it's just too much. And we sold the stuff off, and Michael Burns and Feldheimer said to me, why don't you come to Lionsgate and start a digital group for Lionsgate? And I went to Lionsgate and I became president of digital. It was a created position. There were no presidents of digital in 2008, as hard as that is to believe. And my job was licensing Lionsgate movies to the new emerging streaming platforms like Cinema Now, and Xbox and PlayStation was starting to do some stuff, etc. And Netflix had just started to get into the streaming business in 2008. And one of the first licensing deals I did, I still remember this like it was yesterday, was for the TV series Weeds. I licensed Weeds for $5,000 per episode per year on 20 episodes of Weeds for $5,000 per episode per year on a 2-year license. So it was $10,000 total for 20 episodes. So it was a $200,000 licensing deal for streaming rights for Netflix. Michael Burns came to my office. He high-fives me. Dude, how did you do that? How'd you get him to pay us that much money for streaming rights? I'm like, you know, they want to get into it. They've got the money. They're going to do it. They're going to go for it. High profile shows, et cetera, et cetera. When I left there in 2013, the last deal I did was for Mad Men for about, as I recall, about $800,000 per episode. And if you were to license Mad Men to Netflix today, it would probably be $8 million per episode. So that's over only 12 years. From $5,000 an episode to $8 million an episode. That's how much that business has changed, which is why Netflix, everybody's forgotten, was dead like 10 different times during its history in the first decade of the 2000s. Blockbuster was going to crush it and kill it. There's a famous story that's on the internet, and I was right in the middle of that because Blockbuster was an investor as well into Cinema Now, and so we knew all the top guys there. And I remember them telling us, it's a famous story, it's on the web if you Google it, of when Reed and his CFO went to Dallas, Texas to meet with Blockbuster to sell Netflix to them for $50 million. And they got laughed out of the room. $50 million, Blockbuster said we would, you know, we could
like the Yahoo and Google story.
Yeah, we could build this ourselves. So I was all in the middle of the whole streaming revolution and what happened and the licensing thing at Lionsgate and what was going on there. And, you know, going back to the MTV days and the home video industry and what happened around home video and DVD and all of that. So my career, if I was to encapsulate my career, I would say when I was doing wildlife films, the first television series I ever co-produced was a series called New Animal World, which is a wildlife show. And it was for this new cable channel called the Disney Channel in 1980. And so that was when cable television was starting. And I still remember people back then saying, who's going to watch sports all day long? Who's going to watch news all day long? Meaning CNN and ESPN and these channels that were starting. And who's going to pay for television like that, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I went through that. I went through the MTV revolution. I went through the home video revolution, which started, I produced the first music home video ever released by any record label, which was a compilation of Motley Crue videos that I had done and a Metallica video called Cliff 'Em All about the band. These were the first home videos that were ever put out on VHS tape and Betamax on about, you know, music. I lived through all of that. I saw what happened with the CD-ROM business and the rise and fall of that business. I saw what happened with the early stages of the internet business and the, you know, craziness even of YouTube. I remember when YouTube got bought for $1.65 billion in 2006. Everybody said Google's crazy. And I thought, you know, they're going to shut down YouTube because it's copyright infringement. And they almost did get shut down because of copyright infringement. But they made it through somehow. When I went to Lionsgate in 2008, there was the Weeds deal that I was telling you about. And the other thing that happened was Michael Burns came to my office because he was the senior exec who was the most internet and sort of savvy about that. He said, Curt, pull all of our Dirty Dancing movie videos off of YouTube immediately. Tell them YouTube, they've got to pull them off or we're going to sue them. I said, why would you do that? I go, these are all fans of Dirty Dancing. All they're doing is marketing the movie for you. They're just showing their favorite scene on their YouTube channels and doing a 5-minute video clip promoting Dirty Dancing. I said, well, let's pull the ones off that are showing the whole movie and pirating the whole movie and showing that on YouTube. But anybody who's showing anything less than 10 minutes, let's leave it. They're just promoting the movie. They're marketing the movie to their fans and friends for you for free. Yeah. And then so we did a thing called claiming. So I had a article somewhere in a box somewhere here of me with on the front page of Variety with Eric Schmidt from Google announcing that Lionsgate was allowing YouTube to leave Dirty Dancing clips under 10 minutes up onto YouTube, and we were going to monetize them and send an email to the person who owned the channel. And so if Jason Coles has a channel on YouTube showing Dirty Dancing, you got an email from us that said, hey, Jason, we're going to let you leave that up there. But by the way, if there's ads run against it, we get all that money. That was considered to be like a breakthrough concept in 2008. That was like crazy. Like, wow, a studio is not pulling down their content. They're actually leaving it there on purpose. So all of that stuff, all of that led to QYOU Media. And it was that, you know, and trust me, I mean, as you can probably imagine, when you've been doing this as long as I have, and when you've been through these seminal and meteoric changes over, for me, 40 years, you know, since I was a kid, basically, a young man, working through this business and being from the very beginning of cable and satellite TV to where now, you know, cable and satellite TV's very existence is threatened. Well, that's taken 40 years. It feels like it's happened overnight in one way, and in another sense, it's proof for one thing that I've learned, which is everything takes longer than anybody thinks. Everything. And it's because people's habits don't change that fast. Human beings are habitual. And if you're used to watching a certain show on TV at a certain time and and your dad or, you know, me or somebody who's used to that sort of pattern, it's hard to break that. And that's why even when you get into, you know, electric vehicles, you see the meteoric rise of a Tesla now, et cetera. In the grand scheme of things, electric vehicles are still minuscule in terms of the amount of vehicles on the planet versus how many of them are electric vehicles. Well, undoubtedly, that's going to change over time, and then eventually all of them will be solar-powered electric vehicles. That sort of seems inevitable. But as commonsensical as it is, it's like, why don't anybody pay for gas cars anymore? Let's just have solar-powered electronic vehicles, and you can jack it and plug in electricity if you need to. It just takes time because the auto manufacturing industry is so big, and this is big, et cetera, et cetera. So when we started QYOU Media, what was the whole concept behind that? What was the thought process behind that? The idea is that YouTube was the MTV of this generation. When we started the company, you know, and the original idea of the company really in 2014 really getting going in 15, but now 6 years ago, it was us sitting around and going, you know, what's MTV for today's generation? We go, well, it's YouTube. It's YouTube. That's what kids watch, et cetera, et cetera. This was, believe it or not, even going back, it doesn't seem very long ago, but to 2014, 2015, Facebook was not yet video based like it is today. Instagram had not yet really gotten going. Snap didn't exist. TikTok didn't exist. You know, so that's ancient history in terms of video distribution over devices. And, you know, interestingly enough, when I first entered, going back to Lionsgate for a second, when I first started at Lionsgate, I held up, and the Canadian investors will appreciate this, I held up my then BlackBerry phone, 2008, when I started at Lionsgate in spring of that year. And I said, you guys don't understand. We used to have every Wednesday, there was like the executive meeting where we'd all sit around a big table, all the executives of the different groups. And I was like the new kid on the block. And so I come in and I say, you guys don't realize, holding up my BlackBerry, people are going to watch movies and TV shows on these things. And everybody looked at me like, are you friggin' crazy? And someone said, you mean you're trying to tell me someone's going to watch like Star Wars on their phone? And I said, yeah, they are actually. They're actually going to watch Star Wars on their phone. And they're like, no way, it'll never happen. I go, it's going to happen. So these things eventually occur. And when we started QYOU Media, the idea behind it was, okay, YouTube represents the ocean. It's like got every fish in the sea. There's 600 hours of new video uploaded to it every minute. And I'm an old surfer, as I said a while ago, don't surf very much anymore, but I like to watch surf videos. Well, if you go on my YouTube, you'd kind of think all I ever want to watch is surf videos. Well, that's not the case. It's just because it just pulls those videos and puts them in front of me. So we looked and we said, you know, YouTube is the ocean. It has every fish in the sea, but there has to be a business of curating and packaging the best of what's in that ocean and putting it in front of people. And by the way, these kids who are YouTube stars, those are going to become the stars of a whole new generation of people. They're not going to care about Meryl Streep and Tom Cruise and this person on a TV series. They're going to care about the newest YouTube star, and not even realizing then the new TikTok star, the new Instagram star, et cetera, et cetera. So what QYOU Media is all about at the end of the day, and part of the reason we believe it's poised for such amazing growth this decade in 2020 and the decade of 2020 to 2030, is that like most things in my career, I was too early. I was ahead of the curve in terms of what the thought process was. I wasn't literally at that moment even thinking about Instagram and TikTok and Snap and Facebook video and all that other stuff. That wasn't even part of my mindset. All I was looking at was YouTube, because I'd been deeply embedded into the world of YouTube. And so all I was thinking was, here's this thing called YouTube with 47 billion hours of video on it, and more coming every second. Somebody has to sift through all of that shit and figure out what's cool and best about it. And someone has to do that for audiences. And someone also has to do that for brands and advertisers. Because brands and advertisers, this is where I've learned in my career, there's the expression, the more things change, the more things remain the same. Brands and advertisers like to go for targeted audiences. There was a big controversy on YouTube a couple of years ago when there were brands that, you know, were finding that a Coca-Cola ad was running against an ISIS recruitment video. Mm-hmm. And for a brand, you can't have that. That's like, you can't have that happen 1 out of 1,000,000 times. And so what we said is, let's find the coolest social stars, the coolest digital creators, the coolest content that's out there. Let's house it under one brand, and let's under one brand being the Q, and let's let brands and advertisers come in and align against the programming, the target demographic audiences that they're going for that business. And that's what we do. And we made like every good startup, even with guys like myself who you'd think would be experienced enough not to screw it up, we made a lot of wrong moves. We were too early. We expanded too far. You know, it's interesting. I was reading, the reason I think brought up Tesla is I was reading an article about Elon Musk recently, and how with both Tesla and SpaceX, not that long ago, I'm talking about 3-4 years ago, he almost gave up on both of those companies. Almost said, forget about it. I'm done. It's not going to happen. They had a really big SpaceX launch that if had it not been successful, that was it. Done. SpaceX is over. And Tesla hit a point at one point, not that long ago, only like 4 or 5 years ago, where it was like, we can't compete. We don't have the money. We don't have the capital. We're going down. I'm tired of all this. It's over. And I look at a lot of where we are with QYOU Media right now as being, we went through the first 5 years of this company, and, you know, we stubbed our toe through stupidity sometimes. We stubbed our toe through not being in the right place at just the right time. We stubbed our toe through expanding more quickly than we should have. But now we've kind of figured out who we are and where we are. And that doesn't mean that everything's going to be perfect. But what that means is that we're poised for the correct kind of growth curve right now that I think we all can see. And what that's all about is, I think, not being as overly ambitious as we are. It's taking one very, very specific view into India, because India is such a massive opportunity, which is why billions and billions, tens of billions of dollars are floating in there. There was just a story literally this morning about Amazon investing $20 billion into an e-commerce platform there. Okay, it's because India is the promised land right now. And the other thing is the influencer marketing business, and the business of saying these social stars, these digital video creators are the stars of tomorrow. And I don't know if you or people listening to this would know who like a director like David Fincher is, or Michael Bay or whatever, but those were guys who started as music video directors. Well, they became the star directors of the mega films in later years. Same thing's going to happen with the guys who are the creators on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, et cetera today. They're going to become the most important filmmakers. They'll be the Steven Spielbergs and the J.J. Abrams of tomorrow, because that's the content that kids are watching today, and young people are watching.
Well, to give some flavor, and you can go off on this afterwards. I mean, one of the most successful TV shows of all time, you know, America's Funniest Home Videos, right? Where people are sending in videos, they have low cost, and then even going on from that, America's Home Videos is before YouTube. YouTube comes around, and then after YouTube has been around for a while, you talk about curating, you get a show called Ridiculousness that pops up that now people love, which is really just bunch of funny YouTube videos that have been out for sometimes years that is thrown into a TV show with some funny commentary. You know, it's incredible. You know, TikTok is really just, you know, proof in the pudding for exactly what you guys are talking about. And, you know, you have people that'll just do a voiceover on a certain clip, or they'll do some dance, or do this, do that. And it really talks about what you're saying. Is there anything you wanted to comment on kind of those things? Obviously big pieces that are proving your concept.
Yeah, I mean, the people talk to me frequently about, well, why wouldn't someone just go watch it on YouTube? And I say, well, America's Funniest Home Videos, which by the way is still an extremely popular show, or Tosh.0, or Ridiculousness on MTV. Well, you can see all those videos online. You don't have to go watch that TV show to see those videos. It's because they've found really funny ones for you, and they've added commentary and framed it for you in a way that makes it more interesting. It's exactly what we do. I mean, we have a show in India called Gobble, which is a food show. Well, you can go on Gobble on YouTube and see all the stuff that we've got on our TV show. But what we've done is, they've got thousands of videos. We find the best ones. We package it into a program. And if you want to learn 5 different ways to cook chicken curry, then you can go to the Gobble show and you can watch that show, and it's packaged and put in front of you in that way. If you want to go deeper, go to the Gobble YouTube channel, just like if you wanted to go deeper on any of the stuff that you've seen. The other thing is that people, a part of human nature that I've learned about over my career as well is people like to be told and shown what's cool. Okay. People, that's why commercials, that's why mannequins exist in stores. People like to see a dress thing and go, oh, that looks kind of cool. I want to try that jacket on, whatever. I want to look at those pants, et cetera, et cetera. Most people don't have a sense, aren't creative enough, and don't have a style sense or a thought process where they're going like, oh, I know everything about how I want to dress myself, how I want to look at my house. They want to look at other pictures. They want to do other things. So part of what we're doing is we're leading people into that. I mean, using that same analogy, I say, if you go to a department store, it doesn't have every clothing brand on the planet in there. It has, clothing brands that are popular that people like. It has Boss, it has Calvin Klein, it has other brands. That's what we do. We bring that stuff and put it into one place so it's easy to find the best of what's out there. That's what we're all about.
Yeah. No, it's awesome. Well, look, you've talked for a long time. Some crazy battle stories.
I warned you at the beginning. I warned.
Awesome. Some amazing battle stories, which will make great video content. Obviously an expert in that. Insane hearing the stories with Netflix. Lionsgate is always cool. You started off with some Saw stuff, which, I'm a big fan of. Always watch those movies right before Halloween. It's coming up. But other than that, I think this was great for a little intro. We can go into Q next week, I think, where we'll really deep dive, tell people what it's about, more of where you guys hope to be. You say you're early, but you're early on what maybe we'll do next week in terms of where do you think the industry is going, and obviously how the Q is going to fit in. But anything you wanted to say about your background that maybe super high level? Oh, I forgot this amazing part. Now's your last chance.
Well, yeah, I think that I always tell my coworkers, I say it all the time, you can't win the tournament unless you're in it. You can't win the game unless you're on the field. Scott Patterson, myself, we're tenacious dudes. And in pretty much all the different businesses that I've done, whether they've turned out to be massive financial successes, in some cases, yes, in other cases, no, we've always had wins. And it's because we don't give up. And we stick with it, and you have to learn how to pivot. You have to learn how to move. And I think, when you talk about somebody like an Elon Musk, or you read about a Bill Gates, or you read about even, Steve Jobs, or any of these people. I mean, people forget Steve Jobs got fired from Apple Computer and had to come back, which seems insane when you think about that, but that's the truth. And that's the way we look at our business on a day-to-day basis. It's about staying on the course, remaining determined, remaining open to new ideas, and having specific and distinct short, middle, and long-term goals that you're constantly going after. And if you do that, and you have the ability to raise capital and get people excited about what you're doing around your business, and you stick with it, you'll get there. You'll get there.